Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a look back at week 12 of the Overwatch League, the second week of Summer Showdown qualifiers, and talk about what we saw. So let's start by looking at my picks from last time around. Here they are, as you can see, 10-2 overall, 1-1 on the big pick games, so not too bad. 14-2 overall on those big picks now, instead of the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful one loss that I had before, and 0 that I had before, but obviously, that's nothing anymore. So, let's go and let's start talking about what happened. Now, let's start with Friday. We saw the San Francisco Shock win over the Paris Eternal 3-1. Good win for the Shock. The Eternal looked pretty good. They did challenge them. Hanamura was incredible. The finish that the Eternal had to win that map was absolutely absurd, so a lot of credit to the Eternal for being able to actually pull off their win on that one. But Shock got the win, and obviously, after a one-on-one week last week, a win was very big for them. The Eternal were looking really good, 2-0 on the tournament, so certainly not over for them, but it was definitely a win that the Shock needed if they really wanted to have any shot at making the Summer Showdown. The second match from Friday was the first match that I incorrectly predicted, and it was the Atlanta Reign with a dominant 3-0 victory over the Washington Justice. Now, I thought these two teams were very close together, so I thought this series would be relatively close. It unfortunately was not very close. The Reign completely dismantled the Justice, which I think is more, in my opinion, tells me more about the Reign as a team than it does the Justice. I think the Reign are just really, really good, and I think I underestimated how good they would be. I kind of expected a Florida-type performance from this team, that they would kind of drop off a bit after their tournament appearance. That's kind of what happened in the May Melee to a lot of the teams, where they looked really, really good. Or Chengdu and Florida looked really good in the May Melee, and then they were not as good in the June Joust. And kind of the same thing for New York, though they were kind of a weird team to begin with, so it's hard to really put them in the same boat. But the Reign just looked really, really good. I think Gator still looks like he might be the best Orisa in the league, and that's really a huge part of why they've found success. And with the Reinhardt available now, they can do pretty much anything they want. They have the freedom to run the compositions that work for them. They look a lot better than they did even, earlier in the season as well. So, really good Reign team. Huge win for them. And, yeah, that to me is my big takeaway. It's just that they looked really good, and they were able to take a win away from a Justice team that I think is good. The Justice definitely have issues that we've seen in terms of their pace of play. They're so slow to initiate and move. And that's a problem, especially at the beginning of metas. I think that they're just a slow team to adapt and figure things out. But we'll talk about them again on Sunday, where I thought they played really, really well. So it's just an interesting team. They're a team that I think will be more dangerous in like a double elimination type of situation. But right now, the Justice are a weird team to try to follow and try to figure out. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. But I'm not the most confident in them right now, just because we've seen way too much struggling from them in places where probably we shouldn't. But we'll see. Moving on to Saturday, the Fusion dismantled the Guangzhou Charge 3-0. I think there's a draw in there as well, but big win for the Fusion, of course. Trying to bounce back from that weak performance in the June Joust. Great way to do that is to get the win over the Guangzhou Charge. Charge don't look all that great. Choi Se-won looked pretty good. He's been really the bright spot for the Charge roster this season, and Krong has played alright. I thought Krong struggled a bit at the beginning of the season, but he's definitely come around a lot more and has started to look a lot better. But it's really just those two players that are kind of doing their most. Kariv is getting dove a ton. He's getting targeted so much, and it's just very clear that this Charge roster is struggling to get things going. So unless they're playing New York or the LA Valiant, they really seem to not be able to do much. So good win for that Fusion, winning a game they should win, and getting it big. The second APAC match from Saturday was the Shanghai Dragons dismantling the Seoul Dynasty 3-0 in one of the quickest matches that I saw. It was not even close. The Dragons look to be the best team in the Overwatch League right now. They are not even being contended by anybody. They're not being punished by anybody. And I think it's quite absurd how good the Dragons are and how little competition they're meeting in the APAC region. So really, really, really good Dragons team. Really good performance from them. It's hard for me to even say bad things of the Dynasty because it's just the Dragons are that good. And they managed to get a big win here. Really cementing themselves among the top of the league. Moving on to the NA matches from this week, or for Saturday, we have the Paris Eternal taking on the Vancouver Titans. It was a 3-0 win for the Eternal, and it cemented their spot in the Summer Showdown qualifiers, or the regional knockouts, I guess. I don't know if they can even travel to Hawaii if they make it all the way, so I guess that's something we'll find out when the time comes. But the Eternal looked good, of course. The Titans still look to be a pretty weak team. Eternal coming off, yes, a tough loss to the Shock, but big win here against a Titans team. Definitely one they needed. The Eternal are becoming one of my favorite teams to watch. I tweeted about that. The Eternal retweeted me. And so thank you, Eternal. I'm, I guess, an Eternal simp now, because they have... Avala has liked some of my tweets in the past. The Eternal have retweeted me, so I'm kind of a big deal in the Parisian Overwatch scene. So, no biggie, but it's kind of a big deal. Anyway, the Eternal are fun to watch. I think they're a really interesting team. Their playstyle is super scrappy, very underdog-like. Even when they're kind of favored, you just feel like you're watching a team that feels like an Eternal underdog, where they just kind of are always super scrappy. They never give up. They always do so much fight. So I really like the way the Eternal play. I think I'm a big fan of the team and the way they've been playing. I think they look really good. They're really entertaining to watch. So I'm really happy that we're going to see more of them in the regional knockouts. I hope that they are a team that get a shot at Hawaii. Like I said, I don't know if they can even travel to Hawaii. That's something we'll figure out over time, I suppose. But as things stand right now, I really like what we've seen from the Eternal, and can't wait to see more. Moving on to the second NA match from Saturday, it was the Dallas Fuel barely beating the Florida Mayhem 3-2. Now this, to me, was the most interesting result of the weekend, because the Mayhem, playing with Checkmate at main tank, were able to push the Fuel to 5 maps. And a lot of people said this, even though the Mayhem lost, they still won this series, because they, with a DPS player at main tank, were able to push the Dallas Fuel to 5 maps, which to me is not a great sign for the Fuel, and we'll talk more about them on Sunday, but I feel like this should have been an easy win for the Fuel. They should have been able to roll over the Mayhem, and they weren't. They were caught up, and I think some of that is definitely a bit of a surprise, right? They were not sure what to expect out of Checkmate's main tank play, and while his Reinhardt did not win them any maps, it was his Orisa really that was the key to their wins. I definitely can see some sort of kind of factor there in terms of surprise, and I'm sure communication was a part of it as well. I'm sure Checkmate maybe isn't the most talented main tank, but he may have an understanding of the game that really elevated the way this Mayhem team played. Kind of like we saw with Houston last year, where you didn't think Houston was going to be able to win a ton of games against really good teams with Hydration playing main tank, but there was definitely a level of synergy with him there that was much better, where they played better as a team, but it wasn't going to be enough to really propel them above some of the elite competition in the league. So feels like kind of the same thing with Mayhem, but they just had a tough week this week. They had to play some really good teams, and so they were not really able to show up super well. So I'm surprised this result was as close as it was. That does not bode well for me, for the Fuel, but we'll see, I guess, what happens down the road. But this match, to me, kind of reveals to me that the Mayhem, or not the Mayhem, the Fuel, if there's a tournament where they're not going to reach Hawaii, this looks like it might be the one, finally. Where they've definitely started to show more cracks, and teams in NA have definitely started to improve to the point where maybe the Dallas Fuel are not the invincible teams that we thought they were. The final match from Saturday was my first big pick game of the weekend, was the Houston Outlaws taking on the San Francisco Shock. This one was not very close. Houston Outlaws with the 3-1 victory over the Shock. They lost control to the Shock, which is ironic because the joke has been that the Shock can't win control, and it's the only map they won in the series. This series really changed, of course, on Junkertown. I'm sure everybody out there has seen the infamous Twilight flank that he went for through the Sim TP, where he was basically just put into a death trap. There's a lot of different conversations that have been had about it. It was a pretty big throw, but you can't really blame Twilight for the teleporter, right? They had a plan. They went for the plan. It was something that the team had decided upon. They were going to try to, hammer and anvil the Outlaws, right? Try to, push them in and kind of crush them from two sides. But the teleporter placement wasn't very good. And so it basically just put Twilight in a spot where he was so easy to pick off, and that just kind of lost them the fight. And I wonder if that kind of really went into their mental for the rest of the series, or if it was just that the Outlaws just kind of leveled up for the last two maps, because the last two maps of the series were not particularly close. King's Row was super one-sided, and I believe it was Volskaya was the other map. Super one-sided. It was not even that close. The Outlaws just kind of dismantled the Shock from then on. And the Outlaws, to me, are still a team now that I believe in, right? I was very critical of this Outlaws team. I hadn't seen them really have a great performance against a good team in a while. They had a pretty easy schedule, all things considered, in the June Joust. Their only kind of tough opponent was the Reign, who they lost to. And then, of course, the Dallas Fuel in the regional knockouts, who they lost to. So I was, kind of critical of the Outlaws. We hadn't really seen them play a good team in a while. But they get to go up against a good Shock team, and they found a lot of success, and they were pretty good against them. So I have faith in the Outlaws again. Pretty good faith in them. They have the best record in the Overwatch League at the moment, which is quite impressive. So I think the Outlaws look good. I think they are a team that are still in contention for a tournament spot. I want to see them finally make one of those Hawaii trips. They have the talent. They've looked really, really good. They just haven't been able to come up big in those big games. Granted, the team that stood in their way both times are the Dallas Fuel, who are arguably the best team in the Overwatch League. So, it's not the biggest surprise in the world that they're struggling as a really good team, but we'll see. We'll see what this Outlaws team does going forward. I think they're good. I think they have looked much better, and so I'm hoping the second half of the season is good for them. I know their schedule is a lot tougher this second half of the season, but starting off the win over the Shock, you got to feel pretty good about the Outlaws going forward. Moving on to Sunday, the Seoul Dynasty had to reverse sweep the Guangzhou Charge. Last week, I went on a bit of a rant about how I think the Seoul Dynasty are underrated. A lot of people don't rate them as highly as they should. The Dynasty are a really good team. They barely lose any games. This week was pretty bad for them. I'm not going to lie to you. A part of being honest with people is yelling when I think people are wrong about a team, and also yelling when I maybe myself was a little wrong. I still think that the Seoul Dynasty are a very good team. I don't think that they're bad, but this wasn't a great week for them. And maybe it just came down to having some issues with the way that they lost, and they just kind of had a bad mental going into this game against Guangzhou. Didn't really try that hard. They just thought, we'll just kind of roll over them. And then they started a little weak. And maybe that was kind of how they had to kind of reverse sweep. I don't know. They won the series, which to me is what matters the most, right? Good teams reverse sweep in the face of adversity. That's something I have kind of said in the past, right? Like, if you're a good team and you're up against somebody who is weaker than you, or even a potentially a better team, reverse sweeps to me are signs of being a strong team. and not letting kind of these bad results get into your head. And so that's a really good thing from the Dynasty, I think. The fact that they were able to reverse sweep. They won. But it shouldn't have been that close, right? Like, it shouldn't have been a close series. Choi Se-won had a good series once again. He really is kind of the bright spot. But the team play on the chart is not very good. So falling down 2-0 is a little concerning. But a good win for the Dynasty, regardless. I think that the Dynasty really managed to win where it mattered. They got the win. They finish the tournament with a 3-1 record. They qualify for the regional knockouts. So they are 3 for 3 on tournament qualification so far. So they've still been very consistent. They don't drop many games. Most of the games they drop are to the Shanghai Dragons. And so I still feel good about this Dynasty team. I think they need to show me some good results against the Dragons for once. But I still think they're a pretty good team. My second big pick game of the weekend was the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Shanghai Dragons. The first map was pretty close in this one. It was a 3-0 for the Dragons. The first map was very close, the control map. Junkertown was pretty close as well. The Fusion kind of choked twice. They could have had a first point hold, and then they just choked, and then they could have had a point B hold, and they also choked then. It was a pretty dominant win then from there on out for the Dragons. The third map wasn't even close. I think this Fusion team is just waiting on Shockwave to actually be able to play. I think he comes out of quarantine on Thursday of next week. So obviously the week starts Thursday next week. So he should be able to play. I don't know if they've been scrimming with him or not, and they just don't want to play with him on like the hotel Wi-Fi. But he should be eligible to play next week, so maybe we'll see him. But they're running a lot of EQO Rascal, which I don't really understand why. When they brought Carpe in, they actually got rolled more than they did without Carpe. But I think some of it is just like, this team doesn't really have a great Sombra player. That was pretty apparent. And I know Shockwave isn't really known for his Sombra play, but he may be better at it than EQO and Rascal are. I don't know for sure, but I'd hope so, because they just did not look very good playing against the Dragons. It was just kind of ugly. I think they're a good team, but they obviously don't have the most flexible DPS players in certain areas, right? Like, they have a lot of flex DPS, right? They can play the Mei, they can play the Genji, they can play the Doomfist, they can play the Pharah. They don't have to worry about that stuff. But the Tracer and the Sombra, they don't have the most of those players. Now, with Carpe and Shockwave, who are both hit scan players, though Shockwave also plays the Echo, I think that they should then be able to run a lot more of these kind of Tracer Sombra compositions. If they need a hit scan and they need a Tracer, they have Shockwave to play hit scan and Carpe to play Tracer. I think Shockwave could probably also play Tracer, but Carpe is definitely their best Tracer. So I think they will definitely look better when Shockwave's back to play. I'm not that concerned about the Fusion team right now, unless we see Shockwave come in and they still can't play Sombra, Tracer, all that stuff, then I'll be more worried. But the Dragons just look incredible, like I said. This, to me, was the game that cemented them as the best team in the Overwatch League right now. Their region has pretty good teams, right? Like, the Dynasty and the Fusion are not bad teams. But the Dragons just embarrass them every time they play them. So I look at this as just, there is really no team competing with the Dragons right now. They are the best team in the league, hands down. I just think they just look incredible. Moving on to NA, Dallas Fuel with a 3-2 victory over the Atlanta Reign. This is kind of the game that cements the Reign as a serious threat to me. They completely roll over the Justice. They looked so good against the Fuel. Unable to get the win, unfortunately, but they look really, really, really good. And I think that there's a ton of credit that needs to be given to Unter and Gator. I think Gator has improved so much this season, and I think Unter has definitely brought a lot into this team to kind of boost them and help their coaching structure and really kind of solidify this Reign roster. They are really good. They are a serious team. Like, I walk out of this game feeling better about the Reign than I really do, with my takeaway from the Fuel. The Fuel are good. We know they're good. They've won a tournament. They made a tournament final. Like, we know they're a really good team. The Reign, there's been a lot of question about the Reign, whether or not they were good, if they could compete with some of the best teams in the league. No, they can. They are one of the best teams in the league. They're an elite team. They're a high-level team. They are very, very good. They could definitely be a team that we see once again going to Hawaii, right? Like, that is how good this Reign team is. Don't write them off. Don't ignore this Reign team. They are a legit team. They 100% have a chance at being in that end-of-season playoffs. They look good. They're at 500. They have that one extra point, though, so they are a team that I think you can expect to be competing with the top dogs for a while, because I think they are incredible so far. Next is the Vancouver Titans taking on the Houston Outlaws. Houston Outlaws won this one 3-0. The Titans got so close to the breadsticks. Canada almost had their breadsticks, but they did not. I didn't really watch the series very closely. Outlaws were able to win, which was kind of expected. They won pretty dominantly in a 3-0 fashion. Like I said before, I feel good about the Outlaws, so good win for them, honestly. Very, very happy to see the Outlaws finding success. I'm a big fan of a lot of the players in the Outlaws, so I'm happy to see this team finally, no pun intended by the way, happy to finally see this team putting together some really consistent results now. We haven't seen Dreamer yet this weekend, which is interesting. I like Jonggu a lot, and I think the fact that they're playing him a lot is good. But it seemed like it was the Winston the ball type of looks that they wanted last month, where they felt more confident with Dreamer in the lineup. But Jonggu and Piggy still look really good together, so shout out to the Outlaws. Good weekend for them. Definitely hoping to see a nice tournament run for them in the near future. I don't know why my throat is really bad. I'm sorry. That was bad. Anyway, final match of the weekend. Then we're good. It's the Washington Justice 3-0ing the Florida Mayhem. I did not have really any concerns about this match. A lot of people thought the Mayhem would win. I just couldn't see it happening. They looked so bad in the previous weekend. Yes, they looked good against the Dallas Fuel, but you also had the Justice, who didn't play at all on Saturday. Yes, they struggled on Friday, but they had the day off Saturday, which meant they had a whole extra day to kind of reassess where they were at, plan a different approach, and just go out and look a lot better against a Mayhem team that doesn't have a main tank, right? And I just think it was not even close this time, this series. I didn't really watch it once again. I was busy on 4th of July, so I didn't get to watch this series super closely, but I tried to watch as much of it as I could. I was kind of following it pretty closely. I heard Fury had some sick plays, but you know, that's Fury. He always does that. He had some sick plays against the Reign too. It is just, to me, not a super close series. I think the Justice are really, really good team. I think they struggle to adapt quickly. They struggle to get good at the beginning of metas. But when you give them the time, they are always really good at the end of it all. So I think the Justice are a team that definitely have a chance at Hawaii for one of these tournaments. This month is difficult for them because they do have some decently tough opponents in the next week that they have to play. Well, they've won. They play the Spitfire, which isn't too bad, but they also have to play the LA Gladiators, which could definitely be a really tough match for them. So we'll see what happens. I think that they probably have a chance at going 3-1. 2-2 is incredibly likely, though. So I'm excited to see the Justice team. I think they tend to play better in the second half of tournaments. I mean, they played a lot better in the second half of the June Joust. I think they definitely have a chance of playing a lot better in the second half of Summer Showdown, but we will see what happens next week with them. That is it for me for today. Let me know your thoughts on anything I talked about today in the comments down below. And if you like this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. But that is all from me. I hope you are all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.